In this Canvas session of episode 3, we're going to be talking about outcomes and quizzes. In the previous session, we talked about how to create assignments and pages, so now we're able to move on. Here's kind of the agenda of things that we'll be going over. We're going to give you an overview of new quizzes in Canvas, how to add outcomes to your course, how to build a quiz. Then we'll talk about the settings, the reports that it gives back, and how to do the moderation tools within Canvas.
So just a quick overview of new quizzes. You hear us saying new quizzes. That's because previously, if you've ever used Canvas before and created a quiz, those were classic quizzes. Those will be going away soon in around July 2021. If you've never used Canvas quizzes before, then this is something you can ignore. But you will hear us refer to them as new quizzes, and that's what they are called in Canvas.
Some of the notable features in Canvas quizzes is that there are multiple question types. There are a few more options than you had in Google Forms in the past, such as the stimulus option, which would be kind of like what you'd see on a standardized test with a text on the left and the questions on the right, and they'd scroll independently, and you could have question types attached to a text or an article or even an image. There's a hotspot question, which would give you the opportunity to upload an image and then select a region on the image that the students would click on. So think of this as an example like you upload an image of the map of the United States, and the question is click on Missouri, and the students would be able to click on it, and you will have preset the region of Missouri as the answer. There's also categorization and a nice fill in the blank option. Within Canvas quizzes also, there's some nice settings options that are a little different. Of course, you'll have shuffle answers and questions. You'll also have the ability to give time limits and multiple attempts. We'll talk more about settings later on. There's also some nice moderation and accommodation features, such as extended time. And of course, the big one here, we'll be able to add outcomes to individual questions or overall quiz. Anytime you see the word outcomes in Canvas, think standards. Outcomes is just the name that Canvas uses to describe standards.
So what are outcomes? Just like Tyler said, outcomes is just another name for the word standards. You can attach an outcome to each question in your quiz, and this will become important when you start creating item banks and when you start tracking student mastery on standards. For now, what we're going to do is you are going to import your standards for your course into your course so that you have the ability to pull those outcomes into each question type.
We're going to walk you through that step by step right now in the video. Feel free to pause and do pieces of it and then come back and unpause. So I am here in my course. I'm not on my dashboard. I've gone to concord.instructure.com. I've clicked on my course card, so now I'm in my course. I'm going to find outcomes over here on the left side, navigation. When I get to this page, the only tab up here I need to worry about for the time being is this find option. From here, I follow the breadcrumbs, so I click on account standards, Concord Community Schools, academic standards, and then my content areas will show up. I might just start off with mathematics, define which one in here I want. So for this example, I'll say I'm doing 8th grade math. And then I have my options here. As I click, I get more specific. So now I've got my 8th grade math, and then I've got my specific standards within there. At this point, I can keep going and click in, and anywhere you see the target is the actual standard. But let's say I want all of these folders to be brought in. I don't have to do them all separately. If I just make sure that 8th grade down here or any of these folders that I want to bring in is highlighted in blue, and then I come over here to import and click that, confirm that you want to bring them into this course. This course is called Stevens Master, so this is the course that I wanted in. Let it run for just a moment here, and it should import those standards into your course. These are all the other standards that I've already brought in. So if you add in more, so for example, elementary users, if you add in multiple content areas into one course, they'll show up here. Once you get to this screen, you do not have to do anything here, unless for whatever reason you accidentally brought in the wrong ones, then you can delete or move them. But for the majority of us, once we get to this page, we're good to go. We now have our outcomes attached to our course.
If for some reason you don't see your course standards here in this list, please email either Tyler or Kelly and we can get those taken care of for you.
Now that we have our outcomes attached to our course, we're ready to start the next steps. So if I go back to my slide deck, this slide deck will be available for you. So this how-to video will walk you through how to add outcomes to other courses you need, or if you'd like to review it later on. So let's talk now about creating a course. Again, this slide deck you can use as a reference, but I'm going to walk you through it over here in our course. So I'm going to find quizzes over here on the left side, navigation. It is important that you use this quizzes button to get started. In the previous session, we talked about how you can use, you can build assignments and pages and such right from in a module. But for new quizzes, it's important that you use this. And then once it's built, then you can add it to a module later on. So if I click on quizzes and I come up here to the top corner to my green plus quizzes, this is the point in which we talked about there's the classic quizzes option and the new quizzes option. We are told that this option will go away July of 2021. So we'd like everyone to get in the habit of just choosing new quizzes and submit. This screen should look very familiar as it's the same screen to build an assignment. So I just give my quiz a name. Here I give it my point value. In the assignments group in time, when we move farther into this, this is where you will select the category for PowerSchool. PowerSchool calls it category. Canvas calls them assignment groups, but they're essentially the same thing. So we will work with you later on how to set up your assignment groups the same way that your categories are set up in PowerSchool. This is all kind of similar. How do you want it displayed? Do you not want it to count towards a final grade? The key thing to keep in mind here is right here in the submission type, and it's an external tool for a quiz. You do not need to do anything here. In fact, don't touch it. Just leave it alone. We talked in other sessions about how this is how you would pull in external tools like Kami, Google Assignments, Flipgrid, but because new quizzes is still a work in progress for Canvas, they've added it as an LTI, but it takes care of itself. So you do not have to do anything with this box at all. As I slide on down, this again should look familiar. I want it to be able to go to PowerSchool. I have my assignment options. It's default to everyone, but I can choose specific students in my class if I want to. And then I must set a due date. Once I have all of that set, I can click Save and Publish. And I am now ready to build my quiz.
Here we are at the build part of our quiz. And along the top of this build page, you're going to see 4 tabs. Of course, we're at the build tab right now, but you'll also see settings, reports, and moderate. We're going to talk more in depth about all of these pieces, but right now we're going to jump into building our actual quiz. When you click on this build site, you're going to see a spot for your title, which you've already created. You also will see a spot for instructions. You can add instructions for the entire quiz right here where it says instructions. Below that, you'll see a blue plus. When you click on that, you're going to see all of your question type options here. Some of them are very self-explanatory, while others might be a little unfamiliar to you. If you look at our slide deck, we have an explanation for each question type with a link to what it looks like and a little bit of a further explanation for you. Obviously, a multiple choice answer is very self-explanatory, while a stimulus might be a little confusing to you. But as we said before, that one is one where you have an article on one side with questions on the right side. So we're going to show you an example of what a couple of them look like right now. If we click on the multiple choice option, you're going to see a spot for a question title, a question stem, and some answers. A question title is a way for you to categorize your questions. So if you want to pull these questions later, you can call all of your questions that have to do with main idea. You can give them the title main idea, something that will categorize them for you. But you do not have to use the question title feature if you don't want to. The question stem is where your actual question is going to go. So we've got a question here that's going to go here where the question stem is, and then you're going to type an answer for each one below for students to choose from. You can also add additional answer choices if you want. Off to the right of the answer choices, you'll notice that there is a trash can for you to get rid of an answer choice if you want. There's also a little comment box, and that comment box allows you to provide feedback to the students when they select various answers. So you can enter feedback for each answer option if you want. Below that, we have some additional options. For each question type, you will have the option to show an on-screen calculator. You can choose a basic calculator or a scientific calculator. Now you can do this for the individual questions, but later on in the settings, when we talk about those, you can also choose to have a calculator included for every question. You also can choose to vary your points by answer. For example, if you decide that you want full credit for one answer, but you still want to give partial credit for a different answer, you can also do that as well. You can also shuffle your answer choices so that answer choices will be different among various quizzes for your students. You'll also notice that there is a box to align outcomes and item banking here. If I select Align to Outcomes, this is where I can pull my outcomes that I've loaded for my class, and I can select which indicator I want to align to this question. So if I click on my grade 8, I can go down even further to my algebra and functions or computation standard, and I can pick that actual indicator. So I'm just going to select the one standard that I want to align to that particular question, and I'm going to confirm that alignment. And now that standard is aligned to that question. This will play a role later when we start tracking how students are mastering their standards on these quizzes. Additionally, you'll see an item banking spot down here below, and this is when if you add your question to an item bank, if you click on that, you can choose to organize your questions by maybe standard. So if you've got several questions that all belong to the same standard, or you've got several questions that all belong to the same topic, you can create a bank of those questions. Later on, you can pull from that bank and you can add them to a quiz. So you can add all of the questions from a certain bank, or you can pick and choose which questions you want to add. So when you click on Add to Bank, it will give you the option to either add to an existing item bank or to create a new item bank. So if you already have item banks created, then you can just add it to that bank. If you want to create a new one, then you can give it a title right there, and you can add the question to that bank. Later on, you can pull from that bank and you can reuse those same questions. When you're completely finished with your question, you want to make sure you click Done, or it will not let you add another question. When you're finished with question 1, you can click on the blue plus again and add another question if you want.
At this point, we're ready to look at the Settings tab up at the top. Back on our slide deck here, we have an explanation of each one of the settings that you can refer to back, but I'll walk you through the Settings tab here. The first two options are pretty self-explanatory. If you want the questions shuffled for each student so that each kid doesn't have the same number 1 and the number 2 and they're shuffled up, turn that on. If you want the answers within each question to be shuffled so that each person's, say, a multiple choice questions, option A, B, and C are not the same, then turn on Shuffle Answers. One question at a time will show the student only one question at a time, and then they'll have like a next button in the bottom to move on to the next question. So think of like one screen per question. It defaults will turn on allow backtracking, meaning they'll be able to go back and forth between questions they have not answered yet and questions that they've already answered and want to double check. If you don't want them to be able to go back to previous questions, you can turn off allow backtracking. Require student access code is a nice feature if you want to not let students start until everyone is ready. You can type in a password here. When the student tries to access the quiz, it'll tell them that the teacher has password protected it and they have to wait for you to give the password. There's also a nice time limit option here. If you only want to give students a specific number of minutes or hours to finish the quiz, you can set that here. This feature is a little bit more advanced, but you can set it by IP address, either range of IP addresses for Chromebooks or Wi-Fi. Not a lot, I think, will be used here, especially with the opportunity to use the required student access code. It'll be a little bit simpler. Let's get rid of that. Here is where you can allow the calculator for the entire quiz. A little bit ago, we talked about how you can allow in a calculator for specific questions, but if you want it on for the entire quiz and all questions, you can do that from here. Here's where you can allow multiple attempts. So when I turn this on, I have some options. I can decide how many attempts. So by default, when this is on, it sets it to unlimited. I can change that to limited if I want to. Then if I do give them multiple attempts, I can choose which score to keep, the highest of the attempts, the average, or the latest. The other nice option over here is the waiting period. So if I do give them multiple attempts, instead of just letting them sit there and take it over and over and over again, I can say you can have multiple attempts, but you have to wait 2 days to retake it, or you have to wait 3 hours or something like that. So that's kind of a nice feature. And the last setting down here at the bottom is restrict student results. This just talks about how you can, when students can see their results. You can do it points awarded after each question or after the entire quiz is over. So that's kind of nice too. Back on the slide deck, if you notice in the bottom, wasn't too far. If you notice in the bottom of a lot of the slides, there's this Canvas how-to, which will go a little bit more in depth of the things that we're talking about. This is on many of the slides and will take you to the Canvas how-to. So this specific one will take you to the quiz settings if you'd like to know more about that.
Another section on your quiz area is the reports tab. You have the option to look at a quiz, an item analysis report, or an outcomes report. I had my own children take a quiz just for practice. It was nothing high stakes. It was just sort of a practice activity. And the quiz and item analysis will give you a report that breaks down the difficulty of your items. And you have to have several tries on that quiz before you get an actual report. The outcomes analysis will give you feedback about how well your students are mastering the outcomes that you've attached to your quiz. So if you look here, you can see that my own children and how they have scored with mastery on these particular standards that I attached to my quiz. It's a very simple little breakdown on how they scored. The next tab is moderate. And this is a great little report that shows how many attempts the students have taken on this quiz, how they have scored, how much time they have spent on each quiz. That tells you a little bit of if they have just clicked around in the test or if they actually have spent time thinking and taking their time on the test. There is also a log report to go along with that tells you how long they've spent on each question. And again, if they're just clicking on each one or if they're actually spending time on each question. The next section in Moderate is the accommodations feature. So if I want to set special accommodations pertaining to time for a student, this is where I would do that. So I can click on the time adjustment and I can give additional time, I can remove the time limit, or I can add a time limit multiplier. Now, if I do this for one student, this one right here for Maggie, then that would apply to all of her quizzes in this course. Now, with all of that being said, I've got all of these things set for my students. If I still need to add some other things, I can go over here to Moderate. And if I have set a certain number of attempts for my quiz, this is where I can override that and give additional attempts for a certain quiz, or I can also adjust the time setting again over here. And I can also reopen a quiz that's already been closed, and that's specific to that student.
So those are a lot of the basics of the outcomes and quizzes. We know that we have not hit quite everything yet. For example, we've just described to you how to create the quiz, but we have yet to get to how to grade the quiz. And there are many other things like that. In upcoming sessions, we'll go farther into detail. And then like in the past couple of years, we will have summer sessions where we'll fill in the gaps of the things that we haven't quite got to all the way. With the year that we're having, we're only able to get in front of you 3 times. So we want to try to get the big rocks and give you what you need to start being dangerous and creating in there. So you've now got assignments, pages, modules, and quizzes. As the time goes by, and hopefully before the fall of next year, you'll have a lot more tools in your tool belt on how to do all of this. If you've got the slide deck pulled up right now, if you wouldn't mind clicking on the exit ticket, and there's only one question on there, well, 2, what building are you from? And then the only question that we ask is, of the things that we've already taught you between this session and the previous session, so the assignments, pages, modules, and then this one with quizzes, what are some lingering questions? I know we both know that there are still many, many questions out there of things we haven't gotten to, but of the things we have, what are some things, what is a lingering question that you have? Of course, don't forget, on our DLS website, there are a lot of how-tos already. We will be adding to that as we go, and there's a lot of great Canvas support within this slide deck you can use. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day.